Can you hear me, Fargo? All right, and Bismarck people that are virtual. I have a feeling it's just going to be ongoing like this all semester. So like I posted in an announcement, I'm just going to plan on having a Zoom link. And if something happens, you know, if you're not feeling well, you can always jump on. If you're so sick and you can't, and you maybe have an appointment or something like that, I'll try and have everything recorded, and so at least there's something, okay? I'm going to start going through Canvas now and how Canvas is set up for this particular course. It's a little different than 704 because there's a lab course, or there's a lab associated with this course. And so I'll kind of show you how I organized that. If I start sharing. Go. And if I click on home, oh goodness, look at that. Show you guys that. Fargo, are you seeing the home page OT value or evaluation in OT? Okay. We'll wait for the screen to come on here in Bismarck. All right, so 707, here's the course description. Again, this is going to be in the syllabus also, but we're just going to be looking at an introduction to our evaluation process. Okay, so as OTs, how do we evaluate our clients? We evaluate all of our clients. And so what is the step-by-step process in which we're gonna do that, okay? We're going to build on some skills, or some of the tools we'll cover will primarily be observation, right? And that way of assessing and evaluating. We'll be looking at interviewing skills. We'll be looking at particular assessment tools. I'll give you an example and I'll go through some of those used throughout our lifespan. And we will also practice administering some of those assessment tools and trying to put it all together for a well-rounded OT evaluation, okay? When I click on the syllabus and schedule, okay. So you'll see here that this is a 3-credit course, and so we're 2 hours a week, but we also have a 2-hour-a-week lab section, okay? And so here are some office hours, the course format, those sorts of things. I covered the course description already. Mission statement, Benedictine values, graduate competencies. So you'll see a couple of these rubrics again placed in our syllabus because some pieces of our assignment that we work on in this course is going to be viewed upon as meeting this core competency from our graduate school. So there, communication is a big piece. So my goals for you are to use appropriate procedures and protocols. So following those standardized formats when administering assessment tools and putting them together for your evaluation. Consider factors that may bias those particular results. Okay. Exhibit the ability to interpret those results. Interpret that data in relation to terminology appropriate to OT. And articulate screening as well as the evaluation process, keeping in mind what are some ethical considerations that we have when we're evaluating somebody. Okay, so in a nutshell, those are the goals that I have for you. You'll see that we're meeting in this course, we're meeting 4 accreditation standards. So just demonstrating the ability to use quantitative statistics and qualitative analysis to interpret those assessments. Okay, so I know quantitative, qualitative, right? Like any of you have had an undergrad research class, yawn, boring, right? Those kinds of things. And so this is where it comes to the forefront of our mind, right? And we have to be able to use those things to interpret our evaluation and tie those to our occupational therapy terms, okay? And help people. 4.4, evaluate a client's occupational performance. And so we do this by using some of those assessment tools that we'll be covering this semester. How do we select and apply assessment tools considering the needs of a population? And so this one gets a little bit tricky, especially now that we're in COVID land, right? Where we have to maybe simulate or we have to maybe think of certain scenarios, what if scenarios, role play, those kinds of things. And then interpret certain types of assessment test scores on the basis of understanding those, we would call them psychometric properties. So for one of the assessment tools I'm thinking of, right, it has normative results, meaning that, oh, if you score this particular score, we're going to compare you and say that you are lower than average, right? Now, I wouldn't say that in client-centered terms, right? Like you're below average, right? That's kind of mean, right? But just for the basis of our conversation on your first day, that's what we would be interpreting, right? That your client did this assessment and they're scoring below where they probably could be scoring, okay? And so on the assessment I'm thinking of, their standard data that they gathered to say, hey, this assessment tool is the bomb.com, everybody buy it and use it, right, was tested on all white middle America culture. And so knowing that about that assessment, if you were working in inner city Chicago, if you will, or Peru, if you will, and you want to use that standardized assessment, how would you interpret those results the same way? Knowing that that test, its numbers, where that norm is, was based on white middle class America. Or if you're using that assessment in a country like Peru or Guatemala or Mexico, or people from that place, right? And they scored according to the test below average. Would we feel comfortable saying that, knowing where that test was formulated from and with what population? Okay, so we'll talk about that this semester. Major assignments. We only have good news and bad news. Do you want the good news first or the bad news first? The bad news first. Okay, that's what I got here anyways. Bad news. I don't know if I can deliver this with bad news first. Bad news is there are 4 parts to our assignment. So 4 assignments this semester. The good news is it's set up so it looks like we are only doing 1 assignment. Yay! That's the good news. Anyways, so threads of learning, they're there. When we're looking at assessment tools that are specific to OT, we're clearly doing our professional development. We're hopefully tying in occupation, right, with occupational therapy evaluations. We're looking at effective communication. So how do we communicate with one another? How do we communicate the results of those assessments? And evidence-based practice, looking at the evidence of some of these assessment tools and how they impact our overall evaluation, okay? So exams, a lot of your written assignments are going to be weighed much higher. When you're completing some demonstrations of your assessment tools, when you're demonstrating them, when you're teaching each other how to use some of them, those will be weighed a little, or quite a bit less actually, but they're worth more points. Here's our grading scale. We have a couple textbooks. So the Hinojosa and Kramer Evaluation in OT, I'm following that book chapter by chapter, topic by topic for this course. It's good intro information just about OT evaluation in general. Mulligan is, has a lot of really good specific OT evaluations for peds, for kiddos, okay? I know you'll be using this textbook a lot as you move forward in your peds practice courses, and it's a book that I really find helpful and useful. It's spiral bound, it's handy dandy, it's not huge, you can toss it in your backpack, you can bring it with, it's a good reference. Good referencing tool. The OT practice framework. So you probably have been introduced to this over the summer, correct? Okay. Were you exposed to the 3rd edition or the 4th edition? The 3rd, that's what I was hoping. The 4th edition has not yet been published. It is looking like it may be published in October, but you know, you never know with these things. So I've gotten a sneak peek of it, and some things about the OT evaluation process has changed a little bit, very minor, and this is why I didn't post my lecture up until yesterday, because I was trying to go through that with a fine-tooth comb and make those tweaks and updates, and I did. So, but I know I wrote notes. I wrote notes on my papers on where there may be a change, and I'll explore that as that comes out, and I'll share that with you all. So for today, we'll stick with the 3rd edition, what you're used to, and hopefully it makes sense. 3-credit class, so 2 in lecture. Your lab is 2 credits, or considered, well, it's 1 credit, but it meets for 2 hours. So here's a little formula. You can expect to spend 4 hours per week of instruction time. So 2 hours in lab, 2 hours in lecture, and probably recommending about 6 hours per week studying, researching those assessment tools, practicing those assessment tools, and preparing those presentations. And of course, studying. Attendance policies. I don't even know what to say about attendance policies. I mean, like, and I don't know your guys' names yet, but I know there was somebody like, oh, I think I should stay home today. And then I think Dr. Sibla said, no, come to class. And you know, as an instructor, I just want you to do what you feel is comfortable, okay? Like, I'm recording my lectures, I'm Zooming in. If you feel like you need to stay home, right? Like, I see that as, you're trying to just take precautions to keep everybody safe around you. And so, you know, kudos for that. I really respect that and value that. So You know, it's anything is going. I don't really keep in contact with me. I don't know you guys yet from, you know, I would say Adam, but I think there's only 2 males here in Bismarck. And there's 2, I think, out in Fargo also, correct? Or are there more? 3 boys out there? 3 men? Boys, sorry. Got a lot of boys in my house. Anyways, so I don't think anybody's name is Adam. So I'm not going to say Adam, but maybe I can say like Chelsea. I don't know any of you from Chelsea. We don't have any Chelseas, do we? So that's a safe name. One year we had 4 or 5 Chelseas, and they were all spelled differently. Chelsea, 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 Chelsea. It was just a nightmare. I'm not that Chelsea, I'm Chelsea. Okay, well that sounded the same to me. Sorry. So just communicate, okay? Like, if you can be here, great. If you can't, hopefully you can access stuff alternatively. And if you can't, let me know, and I will work with you, and we will figure this all out together. And then when I'm stuck home in COVID land, right, hopefully you'll have grace on me, and we can just get through this together. If you have an issue, please let me know. I know Dr. Kevin Anderson is going to be running some of the labs out in Fargo. And so you guys will be working closely with him. I know he has some really unique opportunities coming up. Since you guys are so close to the OT Assistant School in Wahpeton. And so he's kind of exploring some of that. So you may just have that additional experience. We'll see kind of how that shakes out. COVID stuff, electronic stuff, confidentiality stuff, class conduct, class netiquette, all that stuff is the same across your syllabi. So I'm not going to go through all of that with you. So week 1, I have down our lecture, syllabus review, and then I'll kind of go through a lecture about evaluation. How does our OT philosophy, which we kind of talked a little bit about in 704, or Dr. Hansen did to you people out in Fargo, about a little bit about kind of our history and how there was an identity crisis with occupation, no activity, no functional activity, no functional performance, no occupation, task, activity, leisure, work, you know, all that kind of stuff that sort of led to, okay, people, let's get it together. Let's figure out what we want. Let's figure out what's important. Let's all get on the same page, right? And so today I'll kind of talk about how that all influenced how we look today at OT evaluation, okay? In lab, so today we'll talk about OT evaluation. Oh, of course. I'll talk about that every day, probably. Anyway, have you ever seen an OT evaluation? Great. Perfect. Last year they said no. So I have a variety of sample OT evaluations. Okay, I think one is from Mulligan, one is from a couple other textbooks that I randomly have. And so we're going to look at an OT evaluation. We're going to see where is the occupation in this OT evaluation. Okay, how did they get the information in this OT evaluation? And so what's unique, hopefully, and what's valuable is there's some from different settings. Okay, so an outpatient OT evaluation is going to look differently than a school-based OT evaluation, which is going to look differently than a home health or a rehab or a skilled nursing facility evaluation, which is going to look different than a hand OT evaluation. And so again, thinking back to our models of practice class and OTs in different settings using different terminology, we'll see that in these examples, but hopefully already we'll be able to talk about, are we on the same page? Okay, so we'll just kind of look at some evaluations in lab, okay? Next week, so week 2, we'll have assessment, identification, and practical considerations, evaluation and intervention planning, and then from there, we're gonna start with some of that first piece of OT evaluation, right? And that's maybe looking at, do we do screenings? Do we do a screening first? Okay, and so in lab, then we'll do kind of some screens, those kinds of things. I'll talk about screening tools a little bit today. Week 3, we'll be talking about non-standardized assessment, reliability and validity. It's students' favorite topic in the world. And then what's the next step once we do a screen? If we do a screen, the occupational profile, right? Which is the first part of the OT evaluation in the OT practice framework, right? So we'll practice administering the occupational profile with one another, and we'll take a closer look at that. Week 4, we'll have exam 1. And then after our exam, we will jump in and I will demonstrate the Peabody Developmental Motor Scales. I have some videos of my kids that I've tested. And then in lab, we will hopefully get some hands-on playing, administering, scoring this particular assessment tool, okay? So again, how I have Canvas set up, if I go back to Canvas and I go to modules, the sound effects really help. So week 1, so this is our lecture which we're having today. On Thursday, I have 2 lab sections in Bismarck, right? And so this would be associated with our lab, okay? Students will identify, have kind of an objective, like what's the point I want us to take away from this class or from this lab this particular day? Readings, OT practice framework, lab activities. I usually have like a handout, a to-do list, an outline for myself, for Dr. Anderson out in Fargo. And then, so for lab, I just kind of showed you or told you that we will be looking at different evaluations from different settings, right? And so we have an acute care rehab setting, we have a school-based setting, we have an outpatient peds, and then we have a skilled nursing facility evaluation that we'll be kind of looking at, okay? So this is what we will be doing on Thursday for lab. Other things, if I go to assignments, the point values, you guys, aren't exactly accurate. They're kind of what I guessed at. This is the 3rd year I've taught this course, and so 3rd time's a charm, right? Yay, fingers crossed. So I've had all that student feedback to make suggestions along the way, and so there's some subtle things here. So anyways, what I'm trying to say is these point values for your exams, you may see them tweak a little bit as we get closer to the exam. So like I mentioned, we only have one assignment, and it's an assessment tool assignment. Imagine that in OT evaluation. And there are 4, but there are 4 tasks associated with it. And so each task is graded separately on its own. But how do you separate, if I'm trying to teach you all how to do an OT evaluation, how do you evaluate a client, a patient, a resident, a student? How do you evaluate them? How can I break that evaluation up into different pieces it's an evaluation, right? And so I'm trying to make it a little bit more manageable. Again, student feedback, right? Can we please have more than one assignment that's not due at the end of the semester? Okay, I get it. Yeah, let's break it up a little bit. And so that's, again, a suggestion students had. But the first part is just a handout. Okay, I really like it when students create a handout. We can have it posted to a discussion board, because in your curriculum, you are going to learn about so many different assessment tools. Okay, we're only doing a handful here. And some of them you will revisit in the future in the curriculum. Some of you may not review them, but maybe they'll be on your fieldwork. Maybe they'll be on the NBCOT exam. Okay, we can't guarantee that they won't or that they will. And so we want to prepare you and we want to arm you, okay, with everything that we feel could be on there. And so I'll be sharing some very common assessment tools and how they look with our evaluation this semester. But if you guys in your assignment will be able to explore, learn, get some hands-on experience with them. And so if you create a reference sheet, a handout, if you will, and post them on a discussion, that means you all get that information that you can just file, save, maybe in a gosh, back when I was a student, it was a binder, right? Printed them on hard copy, binder, put them in order, organize them, right? And so then it was just a real simple, easy, open it up. Let's look at all the PEDS assessment tools. Okay, great. You get a little like 1-page summary, so you kind of have an idea of what that tool is. And you can take that with you on fieldwork, right? When you start getting into your PEDS practice courses, you start getting into your adult practice courses, you'll be going over more assessment tools, okay? And so just keep adding throughout the curriculum, keep adding to this toolbox. Okay, do you have a question?
Yeah, so would you recommend that we start to print out the assessments that you give us in this class and make a binder so that by the end of OT school we have it? So is that your recommendation for this class beginning?
So question was, would I recommend you guys print out all of your assessment tools, create a binder, and so that you have something and you can keep adding to them? I think that's how I would do it. But I am trying to learn how to do and be more electronic savvy. And so I think there's many ways to do it, right? Like pediatric assessment tools, and lump all your PEDS assessments in there with your handout sheets, adult assessment tools, and you know, download all of them and put them into your folder, those kinds of things. So I think there's ways for you to electronically do it. I know there's students who have not ever done it that way, but when they hear, like, they go out on field work and they're like, oh, the Brunick-Zatzaretsky test in motor proficiency, what class did I cover that in? Oh yeah, I know we covered it in this class, 707, I know we covered it in a PEDS practice class, and so let me look back for that, and they find it and they're fine with it. So it just depends if you like to organize or if you don't. But nonetheless, you'll be getting probably hundreds of different assessment tools and practice with different assessment tools. So just knowing that will help you maybe think about how you want to organize those things. So let's, first assignment, right? Let's create a handout so that everybody has access to just a very brief get to know the assessment tool thing, okay? Here's the rubric. Copied and pasted. There is a template in the handout, in the assignment description, that I'm going to click on and show you. Okay, so if I just click on this, this is going to have all 4 parts to it. That can be overwhelming for some people, I get it. And so I just kind of copied and pasted per task within the Canvas thing, okay, or within the Canvas assignment. So again, 4 tasks. You can read. The purpose of this assignment is to actually complete an OT evaluation and to interpret it all. Okay, this one again meets all 4 standards. Okay. Assessment tool handouts, again, uploading them to discussion. We're just looking for a simple 1-page handout. Okay, front and back, no less than 9-point font, otherwise you're gonna make me feel old. I have a due date of 10/29 by 5 p.m. uploaded to Canvas, also just upload it to that discussion. Actually, you could just upload it to the discussion board and I will pull it off of there because I have access to those 2. Okay. So scroll down. Here's the rubric I'll be looking at for your handout. And then here's a template. Now I get students, when they look at this template, right, and they maybe have the stroke specific quality of life tool. Okay, some of you are assigned to that one. And it's just a quality of life, little fluffy, you know, how's your upper extremity function? Great, fine, bad, horrible, right? And so, you know, Dr. Lawson, we don't find a lot of reliability and validity issues on there. Like we found an article that says that it's a reliable and valid tool, but it doesn't give us the number. And what do we do? And I don't know if it's test reliability or iterator reliability or if you can't find it, don't put it. Okay, so don't freak out. It's okay. This is just an outline. Some of the tools you will cover might have inter-rater reliability in an article somewhere. Okay, if they do, explain it. Inter-rater reliability was 0.78. Okay, some of them may not have inter-rater reliability. They may have content validity. Well, what the heck is that? That's not on the form, right? Oh, yes, it is. I put it on there. Content validity. Okay, some of them may not have some of those things. And so you don't have to put content validity, no. Internal structure, no. Okay, then your page isn't going to be a page, it's going to be 50, right? And so if there's no reliability or validity measures, just under behind validity, validity not found. Okay. Potential bias. So when you're learning new things, we tend to be very, I want to look for this and I want to find the right answer so that I can copy it on here. Okay. Potential biases, some of your assessment tools that you will be assigned may not have a bias, because if they wrote down that they had a bias, people wouldn't buy it. They wouldn't make money off of it. It wouldn't be the bomb.com, right? So you may have to think about how, okay, how did the test developers address potential bias? Okay, you may have to think about that. Has it been published in 5 different languages? Okay, maybe they didn't. So unable to determine if the authors did account for bias, which could be a limitation of the tool. Okay, it's your ability to analyze the tool. So again, do the best you can with the outline. Some of the tools I know quite well. Some of the tools I don't know that well. I never used in practice. Okay, so just being honest with you. If you have a question, I can do the best I can. I can ask you what steps have you followed and where have you found, where have you looked. I can help you with those kinds of things. But again, you know, some of the things you may have to step out on a ledge and have your own thought about them, especially if you can't find them per se, and just know that that's normal, okay? So types of scoring, normative data, reliability, validity, bias. I'd like you to find at least one journal article on the tool, and just so that you have a reference, if you will, right? And what is the article saying? Okay. A lot of the articles of the tool may be comparing that tool to another tool that has already established its reliability and validity. So we're just as good as, right? I think is it the Barthel index compared themselves with the functional independence measure. The functional independence measure we'll talk about, and it is a beast of an assessment tool that measures self-care skills used in a lot of rehab settings and rehab hospitals. Oh, it's so detail oriented, and the place has to pay you to do training, and they have to train everybody, and it's very complicated, very complex. And so then the little Barthel, like the little engine that could, comes along and says, we're just as good, we're just as good, we're just as good as the FIM, and we only take 30 minutes to administer, right? And so there's a assessment, or there's a article out there that justifies that. And so as an OT practitioner going out into field work, right? What's an outcome measure you can use to assess activities of daily living? FIM, well, you won't be trained in FIM as a new grad, but maybe you could use this one because it's just as good, right? Yeah, okay, win-win. So again, finding that article, I think just helps kind of ground that some of these tools, the evidence that's within some of these tools. Okay, and again, one of the threads of learning, evidence-based practice. References used in APA format. Okay. You guys started APA format 7th edition. Okay, you're a step ahead of me. So I don't know if this is, I don't know if this is exactly correct. It looks like it's missing a period right there. Anyways. Okay, so that will be task 1, just the handout. Okay, I'm gonna go jump to task 2. You are going to conduct an OT evaluation. So again, the 2 steps in the OT evaluation is occupational profile, right? And assessing occupational performance. In other words, how we assess that occupational performance will likely show up in your assigned assessment tool, okay? So I have a permission to test form. So making sure that when you actually administer it to somebody, that you get them to sign that it was okay for them to be tested. Okay, it's a liability thing. You will conduct an occupational profile. And again, in lab, in a couple weeks, I believe it is, we'll be going over how to conduct an occupational profile. So you should have the tools to do that. You will administer your assessment tool. Okay, you will score it up, and you will formulate it in an OT report. And so in your textbook, just to stay true to your textbook, right, there is a certain format on page 85 in your textbook that walks you through step-by-step how to write up that evaluation. Now, I'm not so much concerned about the format of your evaluation because this is your first course in OT evaluation, and you will have a documentation course moving forward, right? And so some of the student feedback was like, I didn't know how to document. We haven't had our documentation course. Well, no, but by the time you get to your documentation course, you're going to know how to do an evaluation and you're going to know what to document, right? So, I mean, how do you, it's with education, it's hard. Like, how do you, what do you put first, right? And so just trust that it'll be okay. Okay, and we'll use this format because you have this tool. Okay, and you will just simply come up with recommendations based on what you found. Okay, so you don't have to write long-term goals, short-term goals, long-term objectives, short-term, because you'll learn that later. But what we want you to do, and what the accreditation standard is can you give a test, an assessment, and can you tie it together with an evaluation, and can you make meaning from that evaluation to help your client? Okay, at the end of the day, that's what I want you guys to do. So for task 2, you'll need to submit a signed permission to test form. You'll need your report. And then if you're able to upload any assessment tool score forms, you can turn them in hard copy if you need to. Fargo, if you want to take a picture of one, anything like that, just so that I can see it. That way when I go through your report, there's times when I'm like, they tested their peer and they're in the less than 1 percentile rank. That doesn't seem right. So then I'll go back to the score form and, oh, they forgot about this or they forgot about that. And then I'll be able to give you feedback on that, okay? So each assessment tool that I assigned has a particular population. Okay, the stroke specific quality of life tool, guess what population that's looking at? Stroke. Well, you know what, you guys, right now, that's kind of a vulnerable population with COVID, right? So don't go banging down doors of a skilled nursing facility to try and get a patient to do the stroke specific quality of life, okay? It's okay. So maybe what I recommend, okay, identifying a client that fits with the cultural and contextual factors congruent with the assessment tool. Okay, again, if you don't have access to somebody who's had a stroke that you don't feel is safely able to participate, okay, I mean, what if you did Zoom or what if you did FaceTime? And, you know, I mean, there's always a way to do that, right? Or, oh gosh, you know what, I'm in quarantine right now with my roommate. Well, has your roommate ever met anybody who's had a stroke before? Chances are probably yeah, right? Or maybe your BFF, you know, has a grandma who had a stroke. Maybe they can pretend, okay? Like pretend that you are Elma, who is age 96, and just pretend, make it work. It's okay, okay? Understand? So you don't have to like call me up and say, I can't find anybody who's 7 years old. It's okay. You won't have to find anybody who's 7 years old because the peds ones that we're covering are actually caregiver, right? And I've got a gajillion kids. I don't know, Fargo, if you know that about me. And so even if you have to interview me, I can role play, I can do those kinds of things. And I have a lot of exciting kid stories. Okay. So I can't get any more flexible, okay? It's okay. Here's the rubric. Okay, again, extensions may be given for extenuating circumstances. So I've had some people say, hey, I really want to give this assessment tool to somebody back home. Can you give me an extra week? I'm gonna like FaceTime in my partners and we're gonna, you know, they're gonna do this, I'm gonna do this. Fine, fine, I don't care. Just get it in before the end of the semester. Okay, so there's the rubric. So again, flexibility is going to be my middle name, and OT evaluation is my game. Okay. Task 3. So now you've given the class in a discussion board in October, right, a general summary of your assessment tool. Now you've actually practiced giving your assessment tool, right? And so now on task 3, I want you to be able to demonstrate administering your assessment tool and scoring your assessment tool. I'm envisioning like Zoom breakout rooms, those kinds of things, right? Where you're actually demonstrating, you can hold up the scoring tool like on your screen, right? You can say, hey, refer to handout number 1, because I can help you scan in documents, if you will, so that if you want somebody to see the score sheet, right, we'll kind of just not tell the copyright laws people, and we'll just kind of make it work, okay? Again, flexibility, mum's the word, right? And so everybody should be able to have access to what they need electronically, if we will. I think there's like a one-time Google charge. I think this is like a good excuse for a one-time copyright infringement thing if that happens. Okay. And if I get fired, then come visit me. I don't know. I won't be the only one, though. We'll be in it together. All right. So again, I'm thinking the group assigned to the assessment tool. So there's probably going to be maybe 4 or 5 of you, right, combined to an assessment tool. And so I'm thinking like maybe you can offshoot and just do like maybe 2 little breakout sessions, something like that, right? So then 2 of you are explaining, okay, you do the scoring part, I'll do the administration part. Or like, I'll pretend that I'm my client that I did, right? And then like you administer it to me. And so then you guys can be doing that on Zoom, right? And then your peers can be watching, smaller groups can be watching. And hey, I didn't get that. How did you get the 2? I don't understand, right? And so I find that by having smaller groups, you're more likely to ask questions and to feel engaged rather than zone out and not remember anything. Margaret, I don't know if you could tell, I was going cross-eyed. Whew, okay, that's a head rush. Anyways, again, so it becomes more interaction, more opportunity for class participation, and people tend to remember things a little bit more when they can ask questions and when they can see and they can feel like they're part of it, okay? So you'll be demonstrating how to administer, maybe showing part of the assessment, because some of your assessments are going to be long, right? Oopsie daisies. Somebody dropped something and it rolled into our classroom, and anyways, I just made it awkward. Scoring, so you'll kind of go through your demonstration. How would you score it in this situation? Maybe how would you interpret the tool? Okay, I'd like you guys to even have each other practice. So, you know, delegate some tasks to your peers, if you will. You know, like, okay, now you practice. Now you do this, now you do that. Okay, how would you score it? So some like little breakout, you know, things so people are doing stuff. And then together, you may want to explain your experience with when you administered it. Right? This is where you would say, well, I had to use my roommate and she pretended to be a 90-year-old woman and she was really crabby and it was really funny. And this is what we did. I don't think it was realistic, but I think if she would have done this, it would have been realistic. And so you guys can have some conversation and just explain how you interpreted your results and why did you interpret those results that way, okay? Again, I'm going to be looking for participation, hands-on experience, those kinds of things. So any materials you plan to show students, anything that you feel like they should have access to, like maybe a scoring chart, something like that, make sure that that's uploaded to a discussion so that they can access it, okay? There's going to be different due dates because in the schedule, I have allocated certain days for when we're doing the demonstrations, okay? Some of you will be doing demonstrations in a lab, okay? And some of you, because we have really weird class schedule, I think there's one demonstration that's being taken place during a 2-hour class period. So anyways. Task 4, I'm going to go through this and then I'm going to take a break and then I'll get set up for a lecture, okay? So student groups, so like the COPM is a group, the PD is a group. I know those don't make any sense to you right now, but they will next week probably, right? And so there are 2 different assessment tools that are going to be demonstrated and shared. You 2 groups now need to get together and collaborate and come up with some kind of a case scenario, probably of a kiddo, right? So that you can kind of facilitate a peer discussion on when would you use one over the other? I don't know. Would this be better? So you get to make up your own story. your own client. Maybe you want to combine a couple of your clients that you know, like to make one client, and it's going to be a mystery, right? So you're not going to tell anybody what assessment is the right assessment. You're going to kind of create a case scenario, and you're going to take a small group of students along that path, along that journey, if you will, to try and get them to critically think, clinically reason, why would you use one instead of the other? Okay, so it's a little ambiguous. It's meant to just create conversation. Okay, and again, remember that standard, we'll be able to choose, now I'm paraphrasing, we'll be able to choose one versus the other, or will I be able to identify when to use what assessment? And so that's really what I'm getting at with this point, is having that conversation. Okay, again, different due dates on the syllabus. Here's the permission to test consent form. Okay, here are 2 to 3 students per client. If you want to work individually, you can. I had one student one year that was like, I really want to do it myself. I really want to do it myself. Okay. So here, the COPM, this one's going to be taking place in lecture. And so I have people from different labs. Okay, you'll see how I have Fargo integrated. Okay. And sometimes, so that's in class because we have Fargo in class, right? And so you'll be joining us and kind of zooming in and going from there. Other than that, I try to keep, so like for this class, lab 4, oh, PD's going to be done in class 2 in lecture. Okay, that's why I have Lexi here. Okay, now others where I have labs, so Gabrielle and Sarah out in Fargo, we won't be connecting here, but you'll be doing this demonstration with the mini mental assessment out there while we're doing it in our separate lab section here, okay, our lab 1 and our lab 2. So you guys will have to spend some time with the details. Can I tell you that it took me like a month to come up with these details? Okay, any questions? So student feedback, stagger, break them up into different tasks, stagger the due dates throughout the semester. So I tried to do that, tried to make them more manageable, right? To keep us on the same track. What else? What questions do you have?
I have.
Yes. So if the question is, are we presenting in class or are we presenting online? And that's a really good question. If we have students who are at home in quarantine, we may have to set up and do Zoom so that they can fulfill their part of the assignment. And that's the thing that I can't necessarily be flexible on, right? Is when we're presenting or when we're demonstrating or those kinds of things. I mean, worst case scenario, if we have to do something, we have to do something. We'll figure about it when we can. But I think with the use of Zoom, with the use of breakout sessions, okay, this may be completed via Zoom with breakout rooms and just simply having it recorded. Okay. So if you guys need that flexibility as a small group, I think that's perfectly fine. Okay, and we can kind of think about that. Maybe you guys would prefer to do it, upload your Zoom link, right, and then the class just watches it. You know, that just kind of, we can be flexible like that. Yeah. Yes.
So for the first class, that's like with our whole, like everybody that's listed underneath our assessment, and then after that we kind of break up with 2 to
You can.
Okay.
Yep, and I'm gonna be really, really flexible. So like, if you're going to, the reason why we have people doing like breaking up into 2 or 3 students per group per one client is just so it's not so overwhelming having like 5 students there, right? But I think, you know, if you're going to do a simulation with a roommate or something like that, right? I mean, use technology to your advantage. If you like working in larger groups, maybe you want all 5 of you in the same group doing the same client. I think because of COVID, I think that may be okay, right? Because you probably won't be interviewing somebody with a stroke. I'm thinking you may have to simulate that one a little bit. Okay, and so then just use all 5 of you if you want to, or maybe somebody wants to get more experience with that, and so maybe somebody has a grandmother that they can do that over the phone with, and so then maybe just a couple of you could go and do that one. So I mean, anything goes, right? Yes.
Just like if we are to work like that, vulnerable population, do you think it's appropriate to like around them every day, maybe ask them, or just would you rather just be simulation?
I think if the question is, you know, if you work with that vulnerable population already, and you're already going in, I would say, if you feel comfortable with it, and they feel comfortable and they're willing to sign that release, I think that's okay. But what I would caution then is bringing 5 of your peers along who don't work with that population every day. And how can you do that? Like maybe you can FaceTime with a couple of them or Skype or something like that, right? And say, okay, they're going to ask you the questions and do this part of the assessment, and then, you know, shove the iPad in the person's face, I don't know, you know, and then, okay, now I'm going to do this part of the assessment, and then just have them there observing, just so that everybody gets some opportunity with some hands-on and scoring and interpreting and those kinds of things. And so I'm trying to be as flexible and as open as possible, so that, you know, dealing with COVID, but also so that you guys get experience administering, scoring, interpreting, and what you put into it is what you get out of it, right? Does that make sense? Other questions? Okay. If you guys could take like maybe a 10-minute break, I'll get our lecture up and running. And again, you guys are, I want you guys to spend some time with the assignments, with the details, and you'll just have to reach out with me as questions arise. It's a beast of an assignment. It meets 4 accreditation standards, right? It's groups, it's small groups, it's larger groups, it's what if scenarios. It's going to be as, you know, as it evolves and case by case basis. So that's fine. It'll be fine. It'll be fine. Okay. Let's take a break.
Did you see that one we had? Like an elderly person that had it with lots of- She's so cute. Like,
It's fine. Just look at the bush breweries. There's two yeah, exactly. That's what I call them. But, you know, yeah, I would like, yeah. Are you in it too? I see that. Oh, that's cool. Two, so I guess like this one. Yeah. Yeah,
So this one, for the first time, we all do it picture and it was like, and the smoke on top of it, and like, it was like snowing there, I'm like, what is happening? Yeah. I think men were
Nevada, that was all smoky.
yeah, so like this.
That was all smoky. And we're like, what's going on? And we looked at the smoke pathway, and it covered all that goes. Idaho, it's been, yeah, it's still smoky. And then finally, after we got the, it was finally like gone.
And then the last one, you get two big groups, it's two big groups, fire. That's how I do it.
Thank you.
Yeah, so like. I'm like, yeah, it's like, what one would you
Blue screen.
Yes.
So good, and I'm still so like, so.
Yeah, that's how I, so really the only one that you feel. And then like for which one are you demonstrating? Oh, task 3. You're demonstrating. It says you're still up in our lab.
So they have like
I think we're doing backwards in our lab. You're only demonstrating. So then task 3. Yeah, the first one you're doing is
Yeah, no one's gonna get.
just because
You don't even want to.
I know I'm not just like the sometimes my two sides, but anyway.
All right, I think it's been about 10 minutes. And so we're going to get started on philosophy, theory influencing evaluation, OT evaluation. What is it? Okay, and so if you break that apart, right, and just take OT out of it, just think to yourself, what does it mean to evaluate? Okay, what happens when you evaluate? What have you evaluated before? When you're evaluating something, are there certain steps that you follow, or how do you evaluate? Okay. And so far then, based on what your experiences on evaluation, maybe you've been evaluated, right? Maybe you've done the evaluation. Maybe you've gone through very strict steps in evaluating, right? Or maybe it was just an informal evaluation of, oh, my lecture is really boring. right? Because I'm evaluating the class and their response, if you will, right? And so again, how you evaluate can be formal, it can be informal. And so when you think about OT evaluation, and I know I've had you guys in models class, right? And the importance of occupation. And so hopefully you guys are thinking at this point, OT evaluation should be thinking about evaluating formally or informally occupation, right? And what that all entails. And so that's what this course is going to hopefully be about. So let's appreciate the value of a clear evaluation process to OT. Identify best practices in OT evaluation. So what do we do that makes up a good evaluation? Recognize those theoretical influences on assessment and those assessment frameworks. Understand the influence of service delivery systems. So depending on, are we direct patient contact? Are we indirect? Are we consultative? Okay, so how is that going to refer or reflect on our evaluation? And then consider influence of evaluation on the fun stuff, right? The stuff why you guys are probably here as OT students, to do the treatments, right? To do the interventions, to help people. So when we're looking at those philosophical foundations, right, or philosophy, occupations give meaning to daily life, okay? So going home and cooking my family a dinner brings meaning to my life, okay? I enjoy that. My mother didn't like cooking. She always complained about it every chance she got, but I actually like it. Like, I don't mind it one bit, especially if I have a plan, right? If I have a menu planned or something like that, where if I don't, then I'm like, ah, then it's a little bit stressful, right? But again, those occupations give meaning to our life and enable us to participate in society, whether it's with our family, whether it's with our peers, whether it's at a job, okay? All individuals have needs and a right to engage in occupation. Okay, and so this is that occupational justice that I just very briefly mentioned, or you maybe saw it in the syllabus schedule in models class. And being able to engage in occupation is a determinant of health. So what happens if you never cook a meal? If you never engage in the occupation of cooking and self-feeding? What's that? You can't feed yourself. And what happens if you can't feed yourself? You die, right? What happens if you can't take a shower or bathe or get clean? You smell bad, right? And then what happens if you don't ever wash your hands? You get really sick. And then what happens? You die, right? Hopefully not from COVID. Anyways, touchy subject. Anyway, so again, engaging in occupations is a determinant of health, right? You could get sick. You could actually die if you don't engage in certain occupations, okay? The quality of participation in occupation is determined by factors intrinsic to the individual. Why do philosophers always have to add words? It's got to be motivating, right? It's got to be important to that person individually. Okay, what's important to me individually is not the same as what's important to my mother individually. Okay? She'd rather smoke a pack of cigarettes and drink Diet Coke. Okay? She's not Jewish or from New York, so I don't know why I did that. But nonetheless. So the context of occupation and the characteristics of the activity are also important. Right, so context, another word for context that makes things a little bit simpler to me is situation. Okay, so my situation, living in the country, okay, living with like 6 children, right, is very unique. Okay, and so engaging in occupation for cooking, okay, if I'm in a rehab hospital and like that's what I have to do when I go home because that's my role to provide for my family, to cook them meals, having the OT say, can you make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich? Yeah, for an army, right? Like that's not going to cut it at my house. And so again, those occupations that are meaningful to me, right? Like I have a smoker and I smoked 4 chickens this weekend for dinner on Sunday. Again, I got to feed an army, right? And so again, those contexts are different per person. And so we have to figure out those contexts when we're evaluating our client. Occupation is both a means and an end to therapy. Oh, students get so hung up on this one. Means to an end, or both a means. So I'm meaning to engage in occupation. Okay, I'm engaging in the occupation of teaching right now. Okay, I'm enjoying myself. I'm finding it meaningful. Okay, I'm engaging in occupation for the sake of engaging in occupation. Okay, so that's occupation as a means. And occupation as an ends to therapy might mean that as a therapist, I might be working on some range of motion. I might be working on some strengthening. Okay, I might be working on some tendon gliding exercises with one of my clients because they just had carpal tunnel release surgery. Okay, but occupation as an ends means that although I'm doing some non-occupation based things in my intervention, I know they're important enough to do to get that patient ready to do their occupations. Okay, so one of the, as a outpatient therapist working in hands, I think back to a lady I worked with who had carpal tunnel surgery, right? We were doing tendon gliding exercises, right? We were doing some gentle strengthening, some edema control, right? Well, where's the occupation in that? The occupation in that is me sitting across from her saying, you know, once we get the swelling out, you'll be able to grip your hand tighter, right? And you told me in your evaluation that you have a really hard time gripping a frying pan with your hand and draining the grease into a can, right? Well, okay, that seems very specific, right? But that was one of our occupation-based goals, right? Was to be able to cook and to have enough grip strength to be able to grip a frying pan. Not to clock her husband upside the head, but to drain water or, you know, whatever. And so she really needed that. And so that's what we worked on. And so again, the occupation wasn't necessarily forefront, right? Like I didn't make her cook during this intervention session and cook in this intervention section and cook in this intervention session and cook in this intervention session, but instead it was more of the exercise, the therapeutic activity, those kinds of things. And then towards the end of our intervention, as I was monitoring her progress with her strength and range of motion, let's try and do it now. How does this feel compared to when you used to do it? Okay, and so are we meeting that outcome? So our philosophical beliefs of OT started again from our AOTA documents. These were taken from 1967. Occupation is as necessary to life as food and drink. If you don't eat, you don't drink, you die. If you don't bathe and take care of yourself and do hygiene, you get really, really sick and could die. I mean, the list goes on, right? If you don't get dressed and you go outside in North Dakota in January, you could die. So anyways. Every human should have both a physical and mental occupation. Okay, so things that engage us physically and things that engage us mentally. Every human should have occupations they enjoy, at least 2. This is, again, it's the 60s, right? 2. 1 indoor and 1 outdoor. Sick minds, sick bodies, and sick souls may be healed through occupation. So think to that 704 lecture, right? Even earlier than the 60s. Keeping people busy, right? Making people think and keeping their brains busy, those kinds of things. It's all stemming even from that. And so our core beliefs as an occupational therapist, and again, our philosophical beliefs, our core beliefs, they've sort of grown, they've emerged over time, right? But we still hold true that occupation is necessary to a healthy, meaningful life, okay? Clients have the right to make choices and to be a participant in their therapeutic process. Okay, so if I'm working with George, who lives with his wife, and they live with their daughter and son-in-law, and the daughter and son-in-law do all of their cooking and cleaning for them and help them get into the shower and help them get dressed and those kinds of things. If I'm their OT, maybe in a hospital because maybe they had one of them had a fall, right? Am I going to make them do a load of laundry before they go home? Probably not, because they don't have to do that in their house, right? They don't engage in that occupation. And so I should make sure that when I'm coming up with my goals for them, that I'm collaborating with my client and I'm getting them to buy in. Okay. People are naturally active beings, and people do have an occupational nature, right? I see you all got dressed today. Thank you. Hopefully you ate something today, or you will if you haven't yet. So again, those are some pretty basic core beliefs. And so how do we get our philosophical beliefs personally? So we gain our philosophical beliefs, we can get them from our profession, right? And I just basically, in a very tiny nutshell, told you what OT's philosophy is, okay? You can acquire them through your education. So you all have a vast array of educational backgrounds. Okay, and so I'm sure, I hope that you guys all have something or you learn something from those backgrounds that guide you in your life to this day. Okay, and you all have personal experiences. Okay, now this says especially those gained during your professional career. Maybe it's during your educational career, right? Like maybe you work with somebody who's really, really good and you really were able to problem solve things together. And so now maybe your personal philosophy is collaboration is really good, okay, based on that experience. And so think about, what are your philosophical beliefs? Okay, so just think about that. If we had more time, I'd have a little discussion and those kinds of things, but just think about that. You know, you don't have to necessarily share. But what do you hold to be true? Okay, you all probably are here in some way, shape, or form because you want to work with people, right? You want to help people. You want to get to know people. Hopefully, I don't know, safe assumption. Something like that. And so think about, do your philosophical beliefs, are they aligning with OT's philosophical beliefs? Okay, that we should engage in physical and mental activity or occupation. Oh my gosh. Every human should have things that they enjoy. That participating and engaging in occupation does help us when we're not feeling good. This is a wordy slide, but I wanted everything to fit on the slide because it's what the OT practice framework is, which guides what we learn in this course, right? And so the evaluation piece of this course, what is OT evaluation? Okay, OT evaluation is occupational profile and analysis of occupational performance. That is where we are focusing on in this course, in this semester. Okay, so your occupational profile is going to be your summary of your client's history, It can be their health history, right? OT is always throwing occupation in there. So of course it's occupational history, right? Basically, what are your roles, your habits, your routines, okay? Your patterns of living. What is your interests? What are your values? What do you need to do? What do you need to be able to do that you're not able to do, that you're struggling with? Okay, this is where you can get your client's point of view. How do you think we would get this information? Through part of your OT evaluation, but how can I reword that? Who best knows the client's occupational history, pattern of daily living, personal interests? Themselves. Yeah. And so probably during your occupational profile, right, you'll likely see that being conducted via an interview, right, where you're asking open-ended questions, where you are asking them particular things like, tell me about your day. What do you usually do? What's the hardest for you? Okay, and so I think there's one assessment tool, the Canadian Occupational Performance Measure, COPM, that some of you guys are assigned, takes that a step further and really makes that more objective. Okay, and it's a widely known OT assessment that really helps you get that occupational profile, if you will. Analysis of occupational performance. This is where the OT identifies the client's needs. Okay, so we're asking the client, what are you having trouble with? What do you usually do? What do you have to do in order to go home? Okay, depending on what setting you're in. Well, I have to bathe. I have to bathe myself. I have to get myself dressed. I have to get to and from the bathroom. Okay, I have to make myself a meal, but just one meal because Meals on Wheels comes in the afternoons and they give me so much food that I usually can eat that like 2 days. And so then I usually stock up over, so then on the weekend, and it's a true story, but I'll stop. And so then, okay, how am I going to assess all of those activities of daily living? They just told me they can do it. So what are the performance components needed for bathing, for making a sandwich, for dressing, for getting to and from the bathroom? Okay, and so that's what we have to evaluate. And that's what a lot of our assessment tools that we learn, that's what they help measure. Okay, they help measure the building blocks, if you will, the performance components, the range of motion, the strength. Oh, okay, that's a manual muscle test. Probably not there yet. You will be, Dr. Schrader. Okay, and so now you have to put it all together and say, okay, the client told me that they can't bathe, they can't get themselves dressed, they can't make themselves a sandwich, and they have to do them to go home, or they have to do that to go home. And so because of my range of motion test or assessment, because of my manual muscle assessment, I conclude that they can't do those things because of decreased strength. Okay, because they have a broken hip and it's healing and they're having a 7 out of 10 pain. Okay, and so what can we do then in our intervention sessions to help them be able to bathe, to help them be able to make a light meal or a sandwich? Okay, and then we would focus on the pain management. We would focus on the activity tolerance or the strength. We would focus on range of motion if we could. Okay, and so that's really where we are going to work in this course in the semester. But how it fits into the OT process when we're talking about the OT practice framework is, okay, now I know what the client can't do based on their point of view, right? I now know, based on my assessment and my analysis of their performance, why they're having a hard time. So now in my intervention, okay, my intervention plan is going to be my goals, Well, they better corroborate with what the client wants to do and needs to do, right? So the bathing would be a goal, the cooking would be a goal, or this whatever would be a goal. The getting to the bathroom, the bathing, did I say that already? The dressing. Okay, all of those would be our goals, okay? Our intervention implementation means that we're going to be putting those interventions into action. So how are we going to get them to be more independent with toileting or to and from the bathroom? Maybe we'll put a toilet riser on the toilet and maybe a grab bar. And let's practice with that. Let's see how that works. Oh my goodness, you just went from max assist, right, to maybe standby assist, just with that simple adaptation. So let's practice that. So in your intervention session, you might be practicing that a few times, okay? Your intervention review, continuous process of re-evaluating. Okay, I just totally re-evaluated in that example. They went from modest or max assist, right, to standby assist. Did I say that, or did I just think that? Okay, I'm like, maybe I'm getting the assist levels mixed up. And so that means that this adapted toilet seat and grab bar helped increase their safety and helped increase their independence, right? And so I'm reevaluating that. Hey, that's a good idea. This has potential to help them get better and be more independent and safe at home. Okay, so I just reevaluated how that intervention session went based on my observations of that client's performance. Okay, so that would be the intervention review. Uh-oh, now it's time for discharge, right? And so what are the outcomes? What is the end result of our OT process? Okay, well, our outcome is that our patient, hopefully, can get to and from the bathroom with this adaptive equipment safely and independently, right? They can cook a simple, or make a simple sandwich so they have something to eat. They can, maybe they bathe and we could only get them to maybe min assist. They need a little bit of assistance with bathing yet. So then we're working with that case manager, that social worker. What kind of community supports are there? Can there be an aide, a medical aide that comes in, a CNA that comes in and helps that patient bathe once a week? Because their time ran out in the hospital and they have to go home, but this is where they're having issues. Okay, and so what are the outcomes? What can we recommend? What were the benefits of having OT? Okay, and so that's how, again, we're focusing on evaluation, but that's how evaluation fits into our whole OT process. Now, a couple points that I just want to highlight, okay, that I don't expect you to even remember, but just so you know that I'm up to date on this stuff. The 4th edition has, I think it's going to be a part 3 in OT evaluation, and that's a synthesis of your occupational profile and analysis of occupational performance. And so I find that interesting because students have a hard time. Here's the profile, here's an assessment tool, and they don't put the two together. And so OT practice framework, it looks like they added a piece so that there is a step to put them both together. So I think that's interesting. Under outcomes, they have outcomes. So what are the end results of the OT process? But they've also added an outcome measure. And that's actually a lecture in this course, the use of outcome measures. So we'll get there eventually. So evaluation is a comprehensive process of obtaining and determining data in order to understand the person. Okay, now of course we can look at the situation, we can look at a system, a population, an organization, all of those things we can do as OT evaluations. It's necessary, we need that OT evaluation to determine our interventions. Okay, we want that. Sometimes, you know, when I have a client and I get a referral and it says, you know, decrease range of motion, well, I know my interventions are probably going to focus on increasing range of motion, right? But where's the occupation in that? And so I still need that OT evaluation to determine why are we worrying about range of motion? How is it affecting their occupational performance? So we still need that OT evaluation to help develop what's appropriate for those interventions. Clinical reasoning is required for us to make choices about what we need to know. Okay, some clients aren't the best at telling you their life story. And so how do we find that out? What things can't you do because you have no wrist range of motion, right? Oh, nothing, I'm fine. Really? Okay, well, let's take a shot at a shot in the dark at this one then. You know, let's try and problem solve, let's try and figure it out. And so some people are a little bit harder, and we have to decide how can we get that information? We have to use that clinical reasoning. Evaluation has been guided by, okay, what info we need to determine if there's a need for therapy, okay, if there's a reason to continue therapy, or can we discharge, okay? Can we discontinue services? So occupational performance components are usually what we evaluate. Those small little building blocks, right? Like your range of motion, your sensation, your sensory processing, your fine motor skills, your gross motor skills, all those things we can measure with assessment tools, right? But it's up to us to determine how those things affect occupation. And so then how can I document accuracy and confidence in my evaluation outcomes so that I can prioritize goals? So how do I know what's more important than the other? How do I know if fine motor skills and increasing fine motor skills is more important than sensory processing? Okay, and so those are things we have to use clinical reasoning and we have to weigh. And it can be hard. And sometimes we don't make the right decision. We sometimes have to reevaluate and say, okay, I went down the fine motor wormhole, but now I'm thinking it's more sensory. So let's add more sensory components to our treatment. Okay, so that's why this evaluation is, we're reevaluating how well our intervention sessions go, and we can reevaluate the process. So you'll hear different terms: occupation-centered, occupation-based, occupation-focused, and they're defined in your book on page 21 a little bit further. But occupation-centered is how we guide our reasoning, okay, and our subsequent actions. And so adopting an OT-specific perspective where occupation is the core of all we do. Somebody's having trouble cooking, we're going to revolve around the occupation of cooking, okay? Occupation-based is to use occupation perhaps as the foundation, okay? So maybe the occupation of clothespins, putting clothespins. Maybe some of you have observed OT, saw like the different strength clothespins, right? Hanging clothes up to dry, those kinds of things. Okay, that can be occupation as a foundation. And then engage the person in occupation for the evaluation and or intervention. Okay, and so occupation-based, we still have occupation in our mind. Okay, we may be doing occupation in our intervention session that will hopefully lead to a bigger and better occupation that they have to do later. Okay. Occupation focused is the immediate focus of the evaluation and the intent of the intervention. Okay, so I put in a raised toilet seat in somebody's room, and because they have to be able to get to and from the bathroom independently at home. So we're going to practice getting to and from the bathroom with the toilet riser, and we're going to focus on that in our evaluation. And we're going to focus on that occupation in our intervention. Okay. So subtle differences, to be perfectly honest with you, I've heard these things all used interchangeably But again, your text does a good job of just differentiating between. So in our OT practice framework, we do not see screening anywhere, which is interesting, okay? Screening is just simply reviewing available data. Maybe it's simple observation to perform a simple instrument. So maybe how I can explain screening is it helps you determine, yes, they need further evaluation. And if so, it might give you an idea of where to fully evaluate, okay? Or no, they don't need OT evaluation. So in a skilled nursing facility where I would work, I had a little checklist. How are they seated at the dining room? Are they able to feed themselves? Yes. They're slouching. Okay. Does that warrant OT evaluation? Yes. I think we can do better on that. So then during my OT evaluation, I'm going to look at seating and positioning. I'm going to take measurements of their wheelchair, right? Of how they position themselves in their wheelchair. I'm going to look at them at the dining room. So that screening tool may or may not happen, right? I don't get to screen every one of my clients, but sometimes I do. And if I do, it usually tells me, do I need to evaluate further? And where can I evaluate further? So your screening should never be the only basis of evaluation or intervention planning. So again, we want to be holistic, right? I may not just look at dining room. I may also look at how is she positioned and seating in her room? How is she participating in different activities throughout the nursing home? Okay. So then our evaluation should be more comprehensive. We should use a variety of ways to get that picture of that person. So maybe our observations, right? Maybe interviewing the nursing staff, maybe interviewing caregivers, maybe a specific assessment tool, if you will. Perhaps re-evaluation is considered a more formal, comprehensive review after the initial evaluation. So your re-evaluation, you may take that evaluation tool, that assessment tool, if you completed an assessment, administer it again and say, are they making progress? Okay. Assessment, you've heard me talk about assessment tools, right? They're just a specific tool or instrument as part of that full evaluation. Again, a lot of those specific assessment tools just focus on a performance component, but it's up to us then to take those results and how is it affecting occupation. Reassessment, again, is an ongoing process to see if interventions are effective. Okay, so is this working? Do I need to tweak this? Do I need to make it more difficult? What we know about OT evaluation, it should be meaningful, it should be valid, it must be of high quality and reliable, which is why I have to lecture on reliability and validity, right? It must help us determine, describe, and help us document the client's need for intervention. Okay, so why is it important for OT to do this and not nursing? Why is it important for OT to do this and not a family member? Okay, and that can be very tricky. It must reflect the unique professional philosophy, which we've gone over, and it has to synthesize all of the data. We have to analyze it. We have to interpret it. We have to use a reasoning. We have to consider how all of that data affects their performance. How that data is influenced by their unique client factors, their context, right? Their environment. Your evaluation report should summarize the whole evaluation process. It should synthesize the findings, the results of all of the data that you've acquired, how you interpret it, and then any recommendations you're getting from those results. So we're responsible to have knowledge about our profession, about human development, statistics, test measurements, the concepts of activity and occupation. We must be skilled at interacting with each other, with the clients, okay? We must be competent at these assessment tools. And so you guys will have to spend time in practice labs with yourselves, going through administering, scoring, interpreting different assessment tools as you move throughout the curriculum. And being clear on the documentation of the evaluation that's appropriate per setting. So how I would document for a Medicare patient is a lot different than how I would document for a child Blue Cross Blue Shield patient. Okay, just different requirements. And those things you guys will learn, I promise, as we move forward. Not in this class. So there's accountable evaluations, evidence-based evaluations, outcome-focused evaluations, and team approach evaluations. Okay, and so again, accountable evaluations, you begin with the occupational profile, you find out what's wrong, then you measure what's wrong with an assessment tool that's appropriate. Okay, third-party payer is that it's covered by insurance. Your third-party payer would be an insurance company. Evidence-based evaluations require sufficient facts about the client, the assessment, the eval process. You explore what's in the literature, what's the most reliable and valid tool that's meeting that client's characteristics. Okay. Outcome-focused evaluations is you're using an evaluation based on what that client wants. So it's a little bit more focused based on what outcomes they want to achieve. Okay. A team approach, an OT evaluation may be larger, maybe part of a larger comprehensive team evaluation. So I think of that early intervention, birth to 3, where I would have a PT, an OT, a speech therapy, and an educator, and we'd all be around this little tiny child, right? And we'd all jump in at our given part and observe each other and do our own little parts and then come back together as a team and say, this is what my piece found. Let's work together to see what's most important for this family. Role of theory and evaluation is something that we'll continue to work on in 704 as we're learning more theory. But basically, it helps us make predictions about certain events, okay? It helps us describe what we've observed, and it helps state relationships between 2 or more concepts. So it helps us state relationship between fine motor skills and shoe tying or handwriting, okay, depending on what theory we're working on. So our theory helps organize our information. It explains relationships. It often links certain concepts, definitions. Some theories are also help us determine how to evaluate, maybe help us determine an assessment tool, and they're critical to helping us with our interventions. Okay? And that, again, we'll learn more on. Guidance for evaluation. I'm almost done, guys. Hang with me. ACOTE, our accrediting body. So we all have to make sure that we can learn, select, administer, and interpret all of these different types of tools. Our code of ethics, okay, beneficence, making sure that we're concerned of the safety of others, we're not putting in harm's way. We prevent bias where we can, that we're following autonomy and confidentiality. Non-maleficence is not doing harm to any client at any time, and so making sure our assessment tools we're using are evidence-based, and that if we are deviating from those instructions, that we're documenting why. AOTA's society to the profession. I'll let you guys kind of read through those on your own. External influences. How many more slides do I have? Just a few. Okay. Institution-based. So depending on what institution we work on, we may be required to give in a certain tool. So if we're working in a rehab hospital, we may be required to administer the FIM and contribute to the FIM scoring, okay? School-based evaluations may be required to have some type of an educational component to them. And if we're working with a particular referral source, they may tell us exactly why they want us or what they want us to assess, like a wheelchair, adaptive behaviors, assisting with a diagnosis of autism, anything like that. It can be more specified based on what our referral wants. Again, this is just reviewing the OT practice framework. We'll be focusing this course on OT evaluation. And then labs, you guys can kind of look through, these are my expectations for lab, just being active learners, exploring the different scenarios. If you're running out of things to do, ask for more things to do. If you don't ask me, I assume you're still working on things that are at hand, okay? Don't be afraid to learn at your own pace. If you can't find something or you don't know the information, stay calm. Okay, do your best. Try and use your resources. Consider your resources, your textbooks, your notes, those kinds of things. You can ask people around you. We strongly encourage you to ask one another. And because there's only one of me usually in a lab section, right? And I'm going through tables and going through scenarios, right? You may have to wait a little while before I can get to you and before I can help answer questions. So those are my simple expectations. Any questions? That's all I have.
I have a question.
OT evaluation in a very long nutshell. Okay. Seeing some no's. That's our first lecture. Put it in the books. Thanks, everybody. Have a good day.